More streaming from home options this week, starting with The Lovebirds, which came out on Netflix. And this was supposed to come out in theaters right before all the COVID craziness hit, and obviously got pulled and found a home on streaming on Netflix. And it stars Kumail Nanjiani and Issa, who are two people who I very much enjoy and want to see succeed. And I think they're hilarious and great and talented. And I have weird mixed feelings on this. So I feel like much like with Stuber last year, which Kumail Nanjiani and Dave Bautista starred in, I love a film where the leads are people of color. I want it to succeed. Like I'm all in for it. I'm there. I'm ready. But I also, acknowledge that just because I want something to succeed doesn't mean it's going to automatically be great. And I think if I had seen this film in a theater and I had paid money and I had not been maybe able to pause occasionally and get up and do another thing or something like that, I would have been a little more disappointed with it. But I think for what it is, I think it's a great streaming film, right? It's a great from the comfort of your home. It's funny. There are very funny moments in it. I think the problem is the whole premise or plot is a little absurd and a little dramatic, and sometimes it can be fun, right? It actually reminds me of the movie Date Night with Tina Fey and I think Steve Carell from a couple of years ago. And so basically the comedy parts are great. They're a couple, those parts are funny. They're, great comedians. They have good chemistry. They feel like they could be a real couple. Both of them inject kind of their senses of humor and their humor as performers into it. And I think that is super successful in this film. But then there's this whole plot line, and I believe it's in the trailers, where they accidentally get mixed up in this crazy crime, all this sort of nonsense. And it's super dramatic and super serious. And you can have those ridiculous circumstances, and they are definitely, fodder for comedy. In many cases, we've seen many great movies that have those in it, but those parts of this movie fall flat, but the comedy parts are great. And so that is why I do think this is a movie where it maybe didn't need your full attention for the entire thing. And so having it be on a streaming platform is a great solution for that. So for what it is, it's a tight hour and a half, if that, and it gets into it quickly. It hits the ground running. It doesn't waste a lot of time. And so I think for a streaming, all the circumstances described film, I think it's a perfectly fine, fun watch. It's not going to be amazing and it's not going to be terrible. So I think it'll make you laugh, hopefully, for a bit. It'll distract you for a little bit. So I think in that sense, it's very successful. But had this been a movie out in theaters, I don't know if it would have done as well. So I actually think it may have been a blessing in disguise that this is how it is seeing its release. So I'm going to give it 3.2 out of 5. I also have Military Wives, which comes out on demand. And I believe it is based on a true story. And it takes place in England, and it takes place on a military base, and it follows the wives of soldiers who have deployed, and they live on a space together, and they're kind of a community, and then they started a choir, and as a way to sort of entertain and distract themselves. And I think there are certainly parallels that we will feel right now in terms of people struggling to keep themselves occupied, people struggling with uncertainty, people struggling with, just all the things that we are thinking. And certainly I would say it is more stressful probably in a situation that they are in. I'm not trying to, say that, oh, woe is us, we're trapped at home having to watch TV. That's the same, but I do think that even if you can't necessarily relate to that normally, you might be able to relate to their experience more so now. Kristin Scott Thomas and Sharon Horgan star, and Kristin Scott Thomas, what a fantastic actress. She really not carries this film, but her performance in this is certainly worth watching. This feels like a very kind of templated movie. Even if it's based on a true story, and even if it's not exactly something we've seen before, I feel like there are a lot of elements of it that we have seen repeated. It's a feel-good movie, and they all tend to follow certain key elements and plot points and that's fine, right? They don't all have to reinvent the wheel. But her performance in this, she establishes herself as she's the wife of kind of the rank leading person on the base, and much like sort of a Downton Abbey, whoever they are married to, that kind of influences their leadership in the base for the wives. If your husband or wife, which I appreciated, there was one moment in this, it takes place, in the beginning of the Afghanistan war, but I was like, cool, thanks for that nod. So if your partner is, X rank, you are expected to show the same leadership and take on the same responsibilities or sort of parallel responsibilities for your community. Everyone loves so I'm a sucker for a singing movie for sure. I think Kristin Scott Thomas, both of the actresses, Sharon Horgan, who is on Catastrophe, which I think and is such a creative force behind Catastrophe, is fantastic in this as well. But Kristin Scott Thomas, I'm just oh wow, you elevated this movie to another level. And did I ugly cry during part of it? Absolutely, because honestly, it's a low gut punch that they deliver, right? Like, you know, people losing partners and families and all that stuff. Like it's very sensitive material, and it's very easy to get emotional about. I think in any circumstances I would have ugly cried during the parts I ugly cried during. But ultimately, this movie's really elevated by the acting performances, and that's actually weirdly refreshing to see right now. If you want like a sort of catharsis that may be a step removed from your personal life, but you can certainly relate to the elements of it right now, Military Wives might be worth checking out. I'm going to give it a 3.4 out of 5. The last thing I want to mention this week is called Have a Good Trip, Adventures in Psychedelics, and it is a documentary, and it is on Netflix, and it explores the world of people who take psychedelics, and a bunch of people tell stories of, you know, various trips of theirs. And I guess I didn't realize how much of the comedy world takes psychedelics, and I don't know why. It was surprising to me, and I actually appreciated how open everyone was about it, because first of all, in some countries, like think about, you know, the Netherlands and Amsterdam, like it's totally legal. I guess I just didn't think about how many people are actually doing psychedelics, and then you've got like, if you're a fan of the comedy world, there is almost everybody in it, right? There's everyone from like Will Forte to Ben Stiller to you know, David Cross, like all these huge figures, and then you've got these musicians, super famous musicians in this. Like it starts off with Sting. I'm like, of course Sting does psychedelics, of course, and you know, people do various psychedelics, right? It's like people who do mushrooms to people who do LSD to all sorts of things. My understanding is this documentary had been in production for a really long time. And so it's got some people who unfortunately have passed. It's got Carrie Fisher, who tells some great stories. It's got Anthony Bourdain. And then actually, in a very timely sense, it has Fred Willard in it, who I think the thing I liked about it the most is that, so it's all these people who are great storytellers also. I'd like to add, like, nobody is just like, yeah, I had a trip and I did this. Like, everyone tells a story in a interesting way. And so if you want to just sit there and be told stories, and you're interested in the subject matter, or at least not opposed to the subject matter, like this could be a really fun, just kind of distracting thing. So the thing I liked about it is like they tell stories in different fun ways, and like I almost called him Ron Swanson, because that's not his name. Nick Offerman is his name, but Nick Offerman has this like funny, you know, kind of hosting interstitial. Adam Scott does all these after school special things, and they do these cutaways to after school specials. Some people reenact each other's trips, and so like Fred Willard shows up to reenact someone's trip. R.I.P. Fred, great comedian. Yeah, I don't know. It was unexpected. I enjoyed it. I not a big drug person, but still was like, cool. This is like fun storytelling. It's very vignettes. I loved the after school special stuff. That really cracked me up. So if it sounds interesting to you, I think it's just worth checking out, and that is on Netflix.